After 4 weeks, the tight end roulette continues, but we have a few promising bets at the position. Here's who we're rolling with at tight end in week 5. What's up, Headliner Nation? My name is Brad, the Rankings King, and before we dive into this week's rankings, just a reminder that these are the consensus rankings between Jake and Kyle. And for more detailed analysis, make sure to check out the start-sit videos from Kyle already posted this week. And if you want even more breakdowns each week, be sure to join the Fantasy Headliners community by hitting that join button below. That's going to get you access to extra rankings like flex, kicker, and defense, and an exclusive spot inside of our Discord. Now, before we dive into this week's rankings for tight ends, we've got a few hits and misses from week number 4. Our first hit is Tyler Warren. And listen, not every week are we going to see him score a rushing touchdown, but hey, we'll take it. We had him at tight end 5, and he finished right at tight end 3. Next up, we've got Jake Ferguson. And obviously, the amount of targets that he gets with no CeeDee Lamb was a reason that we put him at tight end 4, and he finished on the week at tight end 5. Next up is Dalton Kincaid, and it's so hard to trust anybody in Buffalo. They have so many weapons, and they get big leads so often. But we kept Kincaid at tight end number 6 in a matchup against New Orleans, and he finished inside of the top 12 of tight ends. All right, so there's your hits. Here's a couple of misses from week 4. We've got Juwan Johnson. He's still on the field all the time, but it just didn't translate to production in week 4 like the previous few weeks. We had him simply way too high. Next up is Zach Ertz, and the reality is he's just not used as much with Mariota as he is with Daniels. Now, Daniels should be back this week, and so hopefully the targets return as well. And the next is Sam Laporta. And guys, it's so hard to sit Laporta, but it's so hard to rely on him as well with so many touchdowns going to St. Brown, Williams, and that run game. He truly is a boom or bust, and he busted in week 4. Okay, so there's your hits and misses. Let's get into this week's rankings. At tier number 1, we've got Jake Ferguson, Tyler Warren, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and Juwan Johnson. At number 1, we've got Jake Ferguson, and with no CeeDee Lamb, Fergie has become the number 2 option in the Dallas passing game. 39 targets and 34 receptions through 4 weeks, and now he gets the Jets, who allow over 10 fantasy points per game to tight ends, and who just got smoked by Darren Waller. I got a feeling it's going to be a good week. At number 2, we've got Tyler Warren, and a rushing TD in week 4 was not expected at all, but he now has at least 70 yards receiving in 3 of the 4 games this year. He is more safe than ceiling, and the Vegas defense does tend to be fairly good against opposing tight ends, and so we'll want to keep our eye on that. At number 3, we've got Brock Bowers, and he's been such a disappointment the last 3 weeks. He's had no TDs on the season and hasn't even reached 50 yards in each of the last 3 games. You have to think that knee still isn't 100%, but he isn't a guy that you can really afford to sit. At number 4, we've got Trey McBride, and he's another weekly must-start stud that has been kind of underwhelming. He hasn't had a game with over 80 yards yet and only has 1 touchdown. He does have 19 targets over the last 2 weeks, but now he gets Tennessee, who allows the 8th fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends. At number 5, we've got Juwan Johnson, and week 4 was a downer, but he was still on the field a ton. He's been on the field for 90% of the snaps in all 4 games, and you just got to give credit to the Buffalo defense for containing him. He's got a chance for a bounce-back week this week against New York. All right, so that's it for tier number 1. And before we head into the next tier, I want to make sure that you're all set up on Underdog Fantasy. You already know that we are crushing those player pick'ems on Underdog this year, and so what are you waiting for? Head over to Underdog Fantasy or download the app. You're going to create a new account using the referral code Headliners when you do so. Then just make your initial deposit and come join a contest. You're also going to get a first-time deposit bonus and a free player pick'em. And Jake is already breaking down the best picks weekly in a show on Fridays, and he is absolutely crushing it. And so you want to make sure to check those out as well. Links to join Underdog Fantasy are in the description, and we look forward to playing with you this week. All right, that's enough of that. Let's look at tier number 2. We've got Dalton Kincaid, Hunter Henry, Dallas Goedert, Sam Laporta, and Zach Ertz. At number 6, we've got Dalton Kincaid, and he's totally being supported by touchdowns right now. Last week, he only had 1 catch, but it was a 28-yard touchdown, and it made him a top 12 tight end on the week. New England does allow the 8th most fantasy points per game to tight ends, though, and so our fingers are crossed. At number 7, we've got Hunter Henry, and he's the tight end 1 overall in the season and has now scored 8+ fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games this year. Unfortunately, this is not going to be an easy week because Buffalo allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to the tight end position. At number 8, we've got Dallas Goedert, and he's not getting a ton of volume, but nobody is in Philly. What he is getting, though, is touchdown chances. He now has 3 touchdowns over his last 2 games, and now it's not an easy matchup against Denver, but they are going to need him to be able to win here. At number 9, we've got Sam Laporta. And listen, we all know exactly what's going to happen here, right? He's going to force us to bench him by having less than 40 yards and no touchdowns in 3 straight games. And then guess what? He's going to go off, right? Cincinnati allows the 7th most fantasy points per game to tight ends. And so that's why we've left him inside of the top 10. At number 10, we've got Zach Ertz, and we're hoping that the return of Jayden Daniels also means the return of Ertz's fantasy relevance. He really hasn't done much the last 2 weeks without Daniels, and the truth is it's tough to run on LA, so we hope that we see Ertz get more work in the passing game in week 5. All right, that's it for tier number 2. Let's look at tier number 3. We've got Darren Waller, Theo Johnson, Travis Swift, Kelsey, Mark Andrews, and Oronde Gadsden. At number 11, we've got Darren Waller, and it's the first game in forever, and he had 3 catches for 27 yards and 2 TDs. Now, without Tyreek in the offense, do we see Waller adopt that Jonnu Smith role from 2024? He gets a great matchup too, and Carolina allows the 6th most fantasy points per game to tight ends. At number 12, we've got Theo Johnson, and you know that we've loved the prospect of Johnson for a while, and he hasn't really done much, but he is Jackson Dart's best friend on the team, and he tied a season high in targets and scored a touchdown with them last week, so it could be a thing. At number 13, we've got Travis Swift Kelsey, and the return of Xavier Worthy means fewer targets for Kelsey. With Worthy, Brown, Juju, and Thornton in the mix, the Chiefs just don't need him like they did in the past. And he's facing an above-average Jaguars defense. We're not out of the woods yet if you are counting on a Kelsey bounce-back game. At number 14, we've got Mark Andrews. And can we just say, Andrews is so annoying. He's the A.J. Brown of tight ends. When he pops off, he wins you matchups, but he only pops off a handful of times, and you never know when that's going to happen. And especially now without Lamar, we have no idea what Andrews is going to do. At number 15, we've got Oronde Gadsden. And we've seen his snaps increase over the last 2 weeks, and it hasn't really turned into much production as of yet. But at this point of the rankings, why not try to hit on a guy that no one expects, because Washington allows the 4th most fantasy points per game to tight ends. So there you go. There's your top 15 tight ends. And we got a few guys on the outside looking in TJ Hawkinson, Mason Taylor, Brenton Strange, Elijah Arroyo, Harold Fannin Jr., and David Njoku. And that's it for the Week 5 tight end rankings. And bottom line is, guys, stay the course. There's still a few guys that you can trust, and we're here to keep you up to date. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. And as always, we'll be back here with more rankings and breakdowns all season long. Come on, Week 5 Headliner Nation. Let's go get a win.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.